Hello and welcome to the VNUnet.com weekly debrief. I'm Ian Williams and these are the top stories of this week. This week has seen IT security professionals descend on London for this year's Information Security Show. The show officially opened with a keynote speech from former Home Secretary David Blunkett, who warned that the upcoming 2012 Olympics could herald a slew of cyber attacks against the UK. During his speech, he warned that computer and communication systems could suffer a complete meltdown unless channels that can respond to and mitigate attacks are used properly. T-Mobile has announced the upcoming update to its Google Android G1 phone, which should be available for download sometime in the next few weeks. The update, dubbed Cupcake, includes a range of new features and improvements such as an on-screen touch keyboard, support for video recording, faster GPS location, and better web browsing thanks to a new WebKit and JavaScript engine. Meanwhile, Sun Microsystems has revealed that it lost a massive $201 million for the quarter ending on the 29th of March. With the recession hitting hardware sales, the company saw its revenue tumble to $2.61 billion over the three-month period. This is down from the $3.26 billion for the same period the year before. This comes on the back of last week's news that Oracle plans to snap up Sun Microsystems for $7.4 billion. Despite these poor results, Oracle said it expects the deal will generate more profit than the combined acquisitions of BEA, PeopleSoft, and Siebel. The UK government confirmed this week that it is scrapping plans to create a centralized super database to store all communications data, such as logs of phone calls, internet visits, and emails. However, legislation forcing all internet service providers and communication companies to collect and store this data is still going ahead. This raises privacy concerns from groups who say this is just as bad. We'll be discussing this matter further with our reporter Rosalie Marshall a bit later. Microsoft is rumored to be working on a rival to the Apple iPhone. Apparently, Redmond is working on a full new multimedia phone based on Windows Mobile, going under the name Project Pink. The reports suggest that the device itself would be made by the Taiwanese manufacturer HTC and distributed in the US by Verizon, in direct competition to AT&T's exclusive iPhone deal. Microsoft previously released the Zune media player to take on Apple's iPod, but the device didn't prove particularly popular. Staying with Microsoft, the company has also unveiled the first release candidate of its highly anticipated Windows 7 operating system. Following a raft of negative complaints about Windows Vista, Redmond has ramped up development on its successor, which has so far received far more welcome response from those experimenting with the beta version. Commenting on the impending availability of the release candidate, one VNUnet.com reader said, "I'm looking forward to the release of Windows 7, as then I will be able to get rid of Vista that has attached weight to my powerful quad-core. I'm very pleased with Windows 7 as it has tons of new features and also gets rid of the prompts." However, another reader, Nick, was less excited by the news, saying, "I'm still having a hard time seeing the reason to upgrade to 7. I'm not going to see less viruses, I'm not going to see more stability or speed than XP, it's not going to be any easier to administrate, so why bother?" His views were echoed by another commenter under the username Garrett, who asked, "Why would I risk hard-earned dollars on a product that's unnecessary, overpriced, and more than likely of poor quality?" The answer is, I would not. Now, returning to the pressing privacy issues around the UK government's recent announcements about scrapping the proposed super database. Rosalie, what can you tell us about this story?
Okay, well, previously the government had put forward an idea to keep track of the public's communications through a super database, which raised a wave of privacy concerns about how this database would be secured and whether it conflicted with the European Convention of Human Rights. Now the government seems to have completely scrapped that plan altogether, and they've come forward with a public consultation that outlines a new plan that ISPs will instead keep and track the public's communication data, which is the emails, internet sites visited, phone calls, and then make this data available to the government when the government needs.
So how does this new plan fit with privacy legislation in the EU and UK?
Well, yeah, that's part of what the government laid out in this document, in this consultation document. The government has said that although Article 8 of the European Convention of Human Rights states that individuals have a right to privacy over their own correspondence and their own private lives, that this right is actually a qualified right. And so the government argues that, well, as part of this Act says, the government can take away this right if it's in the states, if it's in the public interest. And our Home Office has said that they need communications data in order to use it as evidence in trials and to prevent crime.
Right. But what do the security experts now have to say about these new plans?
They're not much happier than they were before, really. It's still a bit vague, which is what the Open Rights Group have said. The government hasn't really outlined what safeguards the ISPs will employ, when the government will have access to this data, how often, and kind of for what purposes. The lawyers have actually raised the point that when governments employ legislation like this, it's often used for other purposes. The lawyer that I spoke to used the term scope creep, and he referred to the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act in 2000, which was meant to really monitor terrorist activity by intercepting communications, emails and such, but actually was used by local authorities to make sure that children went to the right schools in their catchment areas. So this is another worry. And then Simon Davies from Privacy International, I was speaking to him and he mentioned that he kind of cast doubt on whether the government would actually have the technical expertise to implement this at all. Whether ISPs will be able to tell whether messages are hidden in images, for example, and all these very technical methods that if anyone was trying to hide a message in communications, they'd probably employ. So, yeah,
speaking of the ISPs, I mean, how do they now feel about this? Are they playing ball?
The ISPs have really welcomed the government proposal, but the Internet Services Providers Association, which is the trade body that represents ISPs, has just raised the issue of whether this will actually be an expensive strategy for ISPs to employ, and just that the government make sure that they don't face any extra financial burdens as a result.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that, Rosalie. Join us next week for another weekly debrief, and until then you can catch up on all the latest IT and technology news on www.vnunet.com.